People are always arguing, aren't they, about whether we need to know about the lives of artists or their views on anything in order to understand their art better. It doesn't make the piece any greater or less great, but it's very moving to have the context laid out and then to hear the music and to understand what they were struggling with in their hearts and minds and in their lives.
Robert Schumann was definitely a genius, a musical genius, and like geniuses are, they are very complicated, I think. He was a depressed, sad, melancholic man, which was not easy to live with, I think. And Clara was much more down to earth.
When Robert and Clara Schumann wanted to get married, they received a lot of opposition from her father, who was a very famous piano teacher, and he'd groomed the young Clara for stardom, and he didn't want some reprobate composer coming along and taking her away.
So they had to write letters to each other and to compose things to each other and to live their love without being recognized from the father, which is, of course, a creative thing.
Oh, Robert, if you only knew how I am always so full of love for you, how I want to wait on you, hand and foot, and to show life to you in only its rosiest colours. Give me a kiss to show me that you're not angry with me, and if you can, then just never stop loving me a little. Your love is my life.
She was one of the great pianists of the time. In fact, in the time, she was more famous than he was. And he wrote a lot for her, and he was obviously deeply inspired by her. And his love for her was idealistic and pure.
Well, Brahms comes bursting into the household as a young man in his late teens, early 20s.
It changed all their lives, all their three lives, Clara's, Robert's and Johannes. They were all in love with each other. And Brahms definitely loved Clara, full-hearted with everything. And Robert loved Johannes because of his wonderful music.
The appeal of Robert Schumann's music, certainly for me as a pianist, is that it's very human music. It gets, unlike Chopin, who's very perfect and spins these most wonderful melodies, you can feel the passion, you can feel his pain. Sometimes he writes things that are a bit too long or a bit obsessive in their rhythmic content and things, but you can feel him, the man. I believe you can get to know him, the man, through his music in a way actually that you can't with a lot of other composers.
That's the beauty of all great artists, isn't it? You feel that you become extremely close to them simply through their art, and maybe you get the best of them. You get closest to them through that little doorway. It's really one of his landscapes, I think one of his romantic landscapes that ebbs and flows and brings you in from the very first moment. The marking is zart und mit Ausdruck, which means zart is tender, mit Ausdruck with expression, and that's a a typical Schumann marking where he's trying in words, he was very talented with words, to give a doorway into this unique world.
I find it really interesting to think about that period, you know, pre-Freud, pre-psychiatry, pre-Prozac, when it's all there. You know, you get these sense of these composers working out their mental anguish through the music. And, you know, I think it's a really interesting question for our times, whether anyone will ever write that kind of music again.
When Schumann was in his mid-40s and suffering from a variety of mental health issues and depression and the final forms of syphilis, he was in a very bad way, hearing voices in his head and, you know, screaming in agony in the middle of the night and begging Clara, his wife, to help him. He tried to commit suicide by throwing himself into the Rhine. He was taken at his own request to a mental asylum. He stayed there for 2 years where they did the most dreadful things to him and he never got out. And all the time that he was in this asylum, Clara was forbidden to see him.
For me, he's in the pantheon of the really great ones, there's no doubt. And I think that a lot of the great musicians, living and died, have devoted a lot of their time and their life to Schumann, saying he is the genius that they are most fascinated with on a long-term basis.
Schumann, Chopin, Mozart feel to me in a sort of different category from composers like Brahms and certainly Schubert. Schubert never feels very pianistic to me. Schumann, you know, who was a brilliant pianist, married to a brilliant pianist, certainly knew how to write for the piano, and so it falls very naturally under the fingers. These pieces are just a delight to play.
Slow movement from the piano quartet, Opus 47. One of the great pieces, I think, for piano quartet, one of the great movements. And I feel this is a love poem, this movement, moving between all the instruments with homage in the middle. My interpretation is a homage to Beethoven in the middle.
is a sort of still, brilliant clarity at the centre of many works of art, which denote genius of some sort or another. And in spite of the sort of torturous delusions and so on that he's suffered and the complications of their life, when you hear those compositions, you have a sense of that amazing purity. There's something very still and very joyful in the centre of his work, which is just exquisite.